When you damage the liver by consuming too much alcohol or too much cooked foods or junk foods or even not enough vegetables, because the way to repair the liver is through raw vegetables, and that is why I start everyone out on the liver enhancement in my book, Chapter 10, because if you improve the liver function, you actually can help a lot of different problems. Also, age. Every decade you get older and you reach the age of 50, you lower this hormone called growth hormone. Now, some of you have heard that the relationship between growth hormone and anti-aging. Well, growth hormone is a major trigger for the liver to release this hormone right here that regulates blood sugars. So really, IGF, insulin-like growth factor, is an extension of growth hormone. They're both almost identical in function. So growth hormone does a lot for regulating blood sugars. So we want to keep this high. And so let's say you're not eating a lot of sugar. Well, it could be that you're just getting older to the fact that the liver's not receiving that growth hormone as much. So there are things you can do to improve it, but the fact that is the growth hormone that goes down, you have to be even better on your diet because you don't have the full capacity of that regulation of that liver function. See, growth hormone does three things. It burns fat because it really mobilizes fat for the blood sugars. It also helps you, it's anti-aging, and it protects your proteins. So it's called a protein spare hormone. And what that means is that it prevents your protein from breaking down into sugar and used for fuel. Okay, so it protects your protein. What protein? Collagen. So you avoid getting this loose skin, sagging belly, all that. And also it protects your cartilage and collagen in your knees and your shoulders and these other joints. So it's a very important thing in protecting muscle protein breakdown that's occurring from the cortisol, from the stress. Remember that cortisol hormone, which is very destructive on your cells when you go through a lot of stress, that will break down your muscle protein, especially in your thigh muscle and your legs. That's why you can't get your thigh muscles toned, because you have too much of this darn destructive cortisol and not enough of that. So we're trying to reverse this process. So how do we do it? Number one, intense exercise is very good, but that would be interval training. Very important to keep growth hormone up. And I'm talking like short little tiny workouts, maybe 30 seconds, resting for 3 minutes, back and forth every other day, versus the treadmill. That will actually enhance growth hormone. Unless you're really, really stressed and you're not sleeping, you're going to have to walk. But eventually you want to work up to interval training, okay? And then number two, sleeping. You need to sleep 7-8 hours to keep this growth hormone really high. And then the next thing is you need to get your liver healthy. You need to do the liver enhancement. You need to really protect your liver and improve it. And so what are the foods that will improve the liver? My favorite is, you guessed it, kale. Everything comes back to that kale, doesn't it? We've talked about that in every single video, and kale is one of the superfoods to heal and protect your liver, because the liver loves the bitter vegetables, and it's low sugar, and it has a lot of properties to restore liver function. And when you have that kale shake in the morning, the liver will improve, and you'll get a lot of potassium, and you'll get more growth hormone, and you'll get less insulin, and you'll crave less, and you'll be able to maintain your age better and prevent the protein breakdown. And I've had lots of people improve their blood sugars by taking kale. So I hope this video helped you understand some of the basics of blood sugars and apply this information, and I'll see you in the next video. Hello, Dr. Berg here. In this video, we're going to talk about the deeper cause of diabetes, okay? Now, in order to figure this out, or figure any problem out, we just have to understand what actually is the condition diabetes. So this video is about understanding what it really is a lot deeper. Typically, when you think about diabetes, you always think about high blood sugar, right? A1C, it's an average of 3 months of high blood sugar. You do a fasting blood sugar, okay? That's how you diagnose diabetes. Go to the doctor. Diabetes is high sugar, right? But let's go deeper. What causes the high sugar? That's the question. What controls the balance of sugar is insulin. And insulin has many functions, but one main function is to act as a cellular key to allow glucose to go in the cell. Another function is to lower sugar. So the obvious thing is that diabetes really is an insulin deficiency. Okay? That's really what's causing it, because if there wasn't enough insulin, the sugar is going to go high. That's why it's high in the first place. And when you have insulin deficiency, especially in a pre-diabetic state called insulin resistance, or just diabetes in type 2 in general, you have a situation where your body makes more insulin to compensate for the insulin deficiency. Okay? So if you look at the cell absorbs insulin, and it's supposed to then create an effect of lowering the blood sugar. So with insulin resistance, the receptor starts blocking right here. And then a signal is sent to the pancreas, and of course, it's going to start making more and more insulin so we can drive that communication into the cell. But the first thing that happens is an insulin deficiency. So diabetes is an insulin deficiency, okay? So let's look at the big picture. Here we have a situation where we have insulin resistance, okay? Really, resistance means ignoring. Now, why would this little receptor ignore insulin? That's what I want to talk about next, and that's really the key to understanding the whole picture. Insulin is a hormone. Hormones follow the law of communication. So just like in life, why would you ignore someone? Typically because they're obsessively communicating. You ever talk to someone who just will not shut up? They keep talking over and over and over. I mean, you'll be looking at something else over here, and they continue to communicate obsessively as you're paying attention to them. So obviously they're not in the present time, right? Well, the same thing happens with the body. There's obviously too much obsessive communication, too much obsessive insulin that's then causing the cell to ignore that hormone. Okay, that's really what diabetes is. Your little cells are ignoring insulin. So then the next question is, what causes obsessive insulin secretion? That's where I have my favorite book, Guyton's Physiology. And the reason I use physiology books is because it gives it the basic understanding that usually does not change over time. It usually stays consistent. It's how the body works. Control of insulin secretion. So we want to know what controls or what triggers insulin to go up. What raises insulin, right? First thing it says, formerly it was believed that insulin secretion is controlled almost entirely by blood glucose concentration. Okay? So we basically had this idea that a raise in insulin was only coming from high glucose in the blood, which is after a carbohydrate meal or too much sugar. So that's one cause right here, because right over here it says insulin secretion increases almost tenfold within 3 to 5 minutes after elevation of blood glucose. So you eat sugar, eat refined carbs, eat carbohydrates in general, you're going to spike insulin, sometimes by tenfold. Down here, it says, as the concentration of blood glucose rises above 100 milligrams per deciliter of blood, that's normal blood sugar. That's like 1 teaspoon of sugar in a gallon and a half of blood, your entire body of blood. Okay? So 1 teaspoon. It says right here, as the concentrations of blood glucose rise above that, so that's like more than 1 teaspoon, the rate of insulin secretion rises rapidly, reaching peaks some 10 to 30 times the level of blood glucose concentrations. That's a tremendous amount of spike in your sugar, okay? So number one, what will cause an obsessive communication is glucose or sugar or carbs, mainly refined carbs. Okay, that's number one. Number two, second page, other factors that stimulate insulin secretion. Amino acids, that's protein. It says right here, amino acid administration in the absence of a rise in blood glucose cause only a small increase in insulin secretion. Basically, it's telling us that protein or amino acids can cause a small rise in insulin. Okay, it's not obviously as much as sugar, but it's definitely a small rise. Then it goes on to say, however, when administered at the same time, a blood glucose concentration is elevated, the glucose-induced secretion of insulin may be as much as doubled in the presence of the excess amino acids. What does that mean? It means that if you add sugar or glucose with amino acids, primarily excessive amino acids, okay, maybe too much, you're going to double the insulin. And this is what I've talked about in other videos. You take a hot dog with the bun, the ketchup on the meat, you add those two together, fries, a Coke, with your burger, like the breaded meats, all this sugar with the meat will double your insulin. So you don't want to do that. That's the combination of those two things. Next thing, so we know sugar, protein to some degree, protein with sugar to a greater degree. The third thing, gastrointestinal hormones. Okay, what is that? Well, basically hormones that are triggered in your digestive system when you eat. Okay? It says the gastrointestinal hormones almost double the rate of insulin secretion following an average meal. What does that mean? It means that eating in general triggers insulin. Okay? So we got sugar, protein, sugar with protein, and eating triggers insulin. Other hormones and the autonomic nervous system will also do it too. That's another trigger, mainly cortisol. Now, cortisol is the stress hormone, so stress will also increase insulin as well. But nowhere on this page, in this chapter, in this book, does it say that saturated fats triggers insulin. So saturated fats is not the cause of diabetes or insulin resistance. It's not in the physiology books, okay? So really, this is why when you go on a intermittent fasting, ketogenic diet, you keep your carbs low, below like between 20 and 50 grams. When you don't have excessive protein, and you definitely don't combine protein with sugar, you're going to improve diabetes and insulin resistance, okay? That's really what's causing it. Does that make sense? So if we don't trigger insulin as much, it can heal, and this resistance will go away, and the body will start balancing out. So